Welcome to Accelerating Timelines, the podcast where we journey through the realms of cosmic energies, esoteric wisdom, and personal spiritual development. I'm Astara, a seeker of hidden truths and cosmic mysteries dedicated to unraveling the secrets of the universe.
And I'm Bethan Carr. I am a spiritual guide and spiritual mentor, an energy coach, and I channel elemental beings and cosmic energies to support you on your spiritual awakening.
Yeah, and today we're exploring some unseen forces that shape our existence from the influence of how are we going to put this, Beth? Because we decided to come on in and talk about a certain topic. And as we were preparing for the podcast, we realized that something else was coming up, which is one of
Yeah,
the reasons we created this podcast, isn't it? To do things in real time and to pull on personal experiences that may be affecting the collective.
exactly. I think we've been finding that our personal conversations that we've been having together, where we've been supporting each other with healing and energy work and channeling, would actually be really supportive for others as well. And yes, tonight we were feeling some interference and some influence on our energy field that was the result of which was making both of us extremely tired. And we thought that this might be useful to discuss because some people aren't realizing just how many impacts and influences there are on the energy fields. And sometimes we can be feeling like, why am I feeling tired or why am I stressed? Why have I got all this anxiety? And our brain tries to kind of give a reason for that when actually it's not something that we've actually kind of produced ourselves. It's not from a situation or a person in the way that we think it may have come from.
Actually, this is one of the main things that, as a spiritual empath, that I got into this work because I realized that I was either feeling very tired or very emotional or very irritated, or there was something, where my head felt scattered, something kind of affecting me that I picked up after a while definitely wasn't me. It took me a long time to realize this isn't just me. And I think most people in the mainstream would just naturally assume that there isn't any interference happening on the energy field, that it's just them having that experience. But my own personal journey with that, of which I have written a book on, is very much showing that we can clear these interferences almost instantly if we get to the root of what they are and what is causing them.
Yes, agreed. I think because largely they're quite hidden from most people, they carry on impacting. But as soon as you bring light or bring knowledge and awareness to what's happening, a lot of these energies lose their power and you can kind of get back into your own energy, into not feeling so tired and exhausted, and anxiety can kind of almost melt away if it's from one of these outside influences, which largely, at the moment, a huge amount of what we're experiencing is interference,
Yeah.
which I think we've been experiencing it for thousands of years on the earth, but we're now much more tuned in and much more aware, and the collective are waking up and understanding the unseen realms a little bit more, understanding that there are unseen forces and energies. So we're going to try and bring some light. I guess it's quite a big subject, but we're going to start discussing some of the areas. And like you said, you've written a book as a spiritual empath, looking at all those types of energies and interferences. And so maybe speaking about some of the tools that you've used and that you've written about that can support people as well.
I think it's really important at this first juncture, maybe to really describe like what people can feel. For example, we set our minds to schedule in this interview. We had this planned for quite a while, didn't we? We had prepped it. We had a topic and we understood what we were going to do. And then as soon as we got onto the call, we were like, there is a really heavy influence. We were both yawning. It's not just because it was late or we'd had a tough day. All of a sudden, there was a very strong heaviness, and I felt it on my left hand side of my body, on my shoulder, coming into my throat chakra. I also feel it a bit around my left eye. There's just a feeling of I could go to sleep with no trouble at all. and almost like something is preventing me from maybe thinking completely clearly, and that I just want to literally put my head down and rest it somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You really felt it energetically. I was feeling it in my mental field from my thought patterns, because I think what's really important is to notice when things are slightly unusual or out of the ordinary. So, for example, feeling really tired very suddenly when not much has changed in your outside world, your day hasn't really been that different. Then that flags up to me, is this an outside energy? Is this an outside interference? And the way I felt it today was I kind of got into a thought pattern of feeling like I had too much to do, almost going into kind of feeling sorry for myself mode, and being kind of annoyed at the usual routine suddenly felt really onerous, and like I had so much to get done in the evening, when actually there wasn't much different to a normal evening. In fact, there's nothing different to the normal types of jobs that I do. And it actually went into like a real mind loop of I just have too much, I can't cope, this is overwhelming, and it can spiral if you don't really notice it and don't observe it. It could really, have other impacts as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing to note, that usually these kind of interferences bring in disempowering thought patterns,
Mm-hmm.
negative thought patterns. They affect your ability to feel strong, healthy, well, vibrant. And so it can become quite easy to identify when there's an interference. And so even as we're focusing on it now, I have a kind of heavy, fuzzy vibration, almost like I'm being microwaved on the left-hand side of my head.
Right.
And that feels like it's really accessing my brain pattern. And I can feel it going down my meridian into my shoulder blade on the left. And so there's something really trying to access and interfere with my natural flow of energy.
That's really interesting. And I just want to point out, because people might be questioning this and wondering, well, why would anybody interfere, and why would that be happening? And I just want to explain some awareness that came in last week when I was thinking about our intentions. And as human beings, we are some of the most powerful creators in the universe. We don't realize that, we haven't fully tapped into that full power, but we can create reality in a way that is extremely potent and extremely powerful. Um, and in order to do that, we need to have a lot of energy and our full emotional power and our full physical power. And at the moment, we're being interfered with so much, because otherwise, the awakening collective are going to really manifest the new earth timeline and bring everything back to how it should be on the earth, sacred and divine and unconditional love and unity consciousness. And there are many forces that don't want that to happen. So, in order to make sure that we don't feel empowered, like you said, all these thought patterns are disempowering when they're interferences. And in order to make sure that we don't fully use our intentional power, this is why these energies come in to make us feel depleted all the time, to make us feel disempowered, so that our emotions aren't used in a powerful way. They become, we spiral, or they become too strong, or we're engulfed in them. When actually emotions can be really, really powerful, but not when they're that you feel like you're drowning in them.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that you mentioned normal kind of duties that you're doing at home, routines were suddenly affected too, like your thought patterns around them. Because I notice when the divine feminine or the feminine energy is being interfered with, often it can affect anything to do with feeling good and strong about like nurturing or like mothering, nurturing, creating a nice home, like anything that disrupts that ability to take care of this kind of caretaking quality, then you kind of know on some level we're having a kind of targeted interference as well on the feminine energy.
Yeah, you picked that up, didn't you? When we were both feeling tired, I know that you sensed this feels like it's being aimed at the divine feminine. So all those beings who are predominantly embodying that energy. Um, and yeah, that's what was happening with me. It was around the routine and being in the house, and I just felt I couldn't cope. And there was nothing out of the ordinary. Like I said, I had quite a busy work day, but that wouldn't normally make a shift like that. It wouldn't bring about all those thought patterns.
We've got to remember here that there is unfortunately a background of targeting the feminine, disempowering the feminine, almost like a thought program that's
Mm,
running, particularly in this kind of background of patriarchal control, because we've also just had International Women's Day and Women's Empowerment Week last week too. And I don't know about you, but I felt great on that energy. Like I felt a real shift. Like the more people the more females and people who love like the feminine and that kind of rise of feminine power. I feel that this week we're now seeing a bit of a pushback. And it's interesting, we've come in to share our voices on this podcast, but it'd be interesting to see how many women in the collective have also had a pushback.
yeah, that would be interesting. And I also wonder, um, we're now coming into eclipse season. There's going to be, powerful energies available to us to work with. So it is a time when these types of things come up, when more interference comes up. And we'll talk in a little bit exactly what we mean by interference. We're kind of using a very general term at the moment, but we pick up quite specific interferences and specific sources as well. But it would make sense that they may be producing these impacts at this time, like you said, when maybe there's been quite a shift in women's energy and empowerment, and coming up to eclipse season when these portals and these energies can be used um, for good. And unfortunately, wanting some people want to block that. So yeah, it does seem like it might be because of the timing.
Yeah, it's almost like if the collective feminine has raised its consciousness, even by a tiny amount, it's almost like these kind of things come back in to sort of push it back down or, make sure that it doesn't raise any further. Um, Now, it'd be really good. We were going to dive into this, weren't we, on this podcast to see what this actually is and where it's coming from. And before we began, I already tuned in to see if it was like taking away energy, like siphoning energy, or if it was placing energy on, like a suppressive energy.
Mm,
My guidance was telling me it was suppressing. It was a suppressive energy
yeah,
to place on. Is that what you had, Beth, as well?
yeah, I felt like it does feel kind of heavy around the head, like it's pushing down, almost like a squashing feeling, like
Yeah.
squashing us down, symbolically squashing people down. If you're expanding your energy, you're feeling better, you're starting to move into that really creative, intentional power. This is an energy that wants to just like block and stop and squash.
Yeah, it's almost like get back down, get back in that box.
Get back into that lowest sort of human consciousness that you can. It's that type of a
Yeah,
pressing down.
exactly. Get back in, trigger those fears and worries and stresses and, anything that's going to stop you from actually opening and being more creative.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So shall we have a tune? Well, actually, before we tune in, I wonder whether it's worth talking about the types of interferences that we normally kind of navigate and observe, and
Yeah.
then we could tune in and see what this particular one is.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. So what I notice with myself, with clients, with people, colleagues that I speak with, um, there's a lot more interference than people realize. And this is not to kind of bring up fear and paranoia or anything like that, but the more that we understand the energetic realm and what's actually going on, actually I find it's a much more positive experience to be on earth, because you're no longer navigating things that you don't understand and not even realizing, and you're much more empowered because what's yours, what isn't yours, where your emotions are getting triggered, where they're not, and you actually can tune in much better to the energies that are very positive for you, much better when you also understand which are the energies which are less positive for you. So certainly one area I see is what we would call psych vamps, so psychic vampires, and these are beings around us, other who might present as humans, but they actually don't work energetically in the same way that you or I would, where they're not connected to source. So they spend time triggering people or getting attention in a certain way. Some of them siphon energy at a particular frequency. So they'll want to push buttons to get you into a certain type of emotion. And that's the frequency that they absorb. And it's almost like a survival, like they feel like they need people's energy to survive. So some that I've come across, for example, they siphon energy on the frequency of death and grief. So they will talk about death a lot. They'll constantly post remembrance posts, even if it's people they don't really know. They're just constantly wanting people to get into the emotion of grief. Maybe they work close to death in some way. And so they kind of psychic vamp that type of frequency of grief and sadness, and they use it as kind of as a food, as an energy source. Other people might use fear or control or dominance. They might want people to feel less than them. They might have like a superiority kind of energy that they want to project all the time, a type of dominance. So that's kind of on a very day to day interacting kind of level on the earth. And then we have other layers, and maybe you want to speak about your experience, Tash.
As you were speaking, I think it's really good just to identify there that these people, these people or entities you're describing are actually doing this on purpose. They're doing a sort of action or interaction to actually kind of evoke or provoke this kind of state in someone so that
Yeah,
they can then siphon the energy. That's quite different from someone who's maybe traumatized and needs healing, and their energy field is, in a state of disarray or confusion or complexity, who is not intentionally doing that work. So I think that's just good to flag up. And if there are people who are in a kind of trauma state, sometimes they can actually be um, suffering from this kind of interaction with other people or beings. And I just want to say that we can have people in physical bodies doing this, but we can also have entities, non-physical beings, also working through people to evoke that, and they're still siphoning off that energy. And I'm sure anybody doing spiritual work has heard of, I guess ghosts or entities that hang around people who have addictions because they feed off the energy of that addiction or that particular substance, that particular energy in someone. So, it's quite well known now, I feel, in this kind of work that we do have non-physical entities that also try and siphon off us as in the physical or from the physical realm, I should say.
yeah, yeah. It's like a whole spectrum, really, isn't it, of different types of beings in the unseen realms. And I think that's probably, I don't know, I haven't actually tuned in which is dominant, because I'm starting to realize there's a lot in the physical as well.
Yeah.
Um, but certainly the unseen is perhaps more important to look at, because because people aren't so aware of that happening. You might be aware of people in the physical that you don't quite understand what you don't like about being around them, so you kind of
Mm.
keep your distance even if you don't understand energetically what's going on. But in the unseen realms, there can be a lot going on that people just can't really identify.
Yeah, and I mean, our psychology has come on leaps and bounds, hasn't it? Particularly when there's now a whole conversation around the kind of narcissist empath dynamic, which can be explained with psychology, but we're kind of reaching outwards more, which is why I use the term spiritual empath into spaces where for most people these unseen realms, unknown realms, but actually when you begin to focus on it, they can become really tangible, and you can gain more insight into what you're actually dealing with. In my mind, there's also galactic interference where we can have galactic frequencies, either galactic entities, or we have very helpful galactic entities sometimes, but also galactic beings that are not so helpful, that do not want to advance or evolve, help humanity to evolve. And they can particularly keep us trapped in certain timelines here on Earth and um, help us to descend rather than ascend. So that's another frequency interference that's worth being aware of.
Yeah, that I think that's a huge area of where you and I have been working recently with trying to shift and block and transmute a lot of what's going on the galactic level. Um, but yeah, I think that's massive. And I think they've been having a huge impact on the earth for a long, long time. But we are seeing big changes now in how much they can interfere. But yeah, it's certainly a big area. And I think that's a few podcasts in itself, probably exploring that side of things as well, isn't it? The galactic influence and the history of that and their intentions and things like that.
Also, like I would consider on my list when I'm dealing with clients, a lot of ancestral energy can come up where there can be that we often have like very helpful ancestors and supportive ancestors, but there can also be some very unsupportive ancestral energy as well that can create quite a lot of issues if they're not cleared and put to rest in the right way. Literally having like a very difficult family member floating around you all the time, creating a bit of chaos in your life, that can be a very difficult experience for people.
Even if those ancestors, sometimes it can be energies where they might have just had a very limited worldview or limiting belief. And even that can be quite draining because you don't realize how much that's playing out in your own energy field. You know, you've got the DNA imprint within you and including memories. And these can get passed down and yeah, it can be having quite a big impact on our energy field. You know, as we cleared one for me today earlier on.
You did? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But in saying that, sometimes there can be a contract involved in that to come and actually clear the timeline or clear the ancestral lineage
Mm.
and to help that ancestor in particular let go of that negative interference as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So shall we I mean there's more we can talk about. There's quite a few different types of interference, but I think those are some really big areas and huge influences right now. So shall we go ahead and just tune in perhaps to what's been interfering today for the divine feminines?
Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
So when I was tuning in, the visual that I got was a huge wave, but it kind of looked like I don't know which Japanese artist it was that painted the wave. I don't know if it's even called that, but there's
Oh,
that
yeah.
beautiful picture. So it looked quite stylized like that, and it was really really high at the beginning, and then I saw it kind of cascade down, and it was the intent of this energy. It felt galactic to me, so it's galactic interference, and it was not only to put people into like a survival mode. Like I saw the way it impacted people was like they're all trying to gasp for air and trying to kind of keep their heads from going under. And that's kind of like the thought pattern or the energy I had tonight. It's like I've just got so much to do just to survive, just to keep my head above water. That was kind of the feeling. And then people were almost being kind of tumbled about by it, and it was disconnecting them from kind of the normal energy flow through their body of being connected to the earth, coming up through their body, connecting up to the universe. It was like it was discombobulating people and they were just not centered, not grounded, and just feeling like because when you're not centered and grounded, when you're not completely connected to the earth and to universal wisdom, you feel extremely alone. You feel extremely unsupported. You feel less powerful because you're not embodying that energy is yours, the earth and the universe. That's you're representative of all those energies, and you're just not yourself. You're not 100% yourself, and it was that impact of making us feel less and like disempowered, not strong, um, and just kind of tumbled about. So we're not really on track or centered or able to really even think clearly.
Yeah, I really felt that too, Beth. And what I was seeing was that there was some very old spell work on a timeline. And when I was asking where that was coming from, they were taking me back to ancient Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
and a way of I think that maybe it began as trying to understand the feminine energy, but actually it became an entrapment of the feminine energy. And they were showing me that it keeps the feminine energy in a vibration between anger and fear, like quite a low vibration.
Yeah.
And it becomes like an agitation where particularly affecting um the functioning of the feminine, interestingly, like just like you're saying, like keeping it off center, but it almost affects the upper chakras more than the lower chakras, so
Mhm.
affecting the kind of third eye and the throat chakra. I was feeling it very strongly in my throat chakra, so just continually keeping you off balance, and that in itself keeps you out of alignment with your creative power and your creative wisdom.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, usually at this point, we begin to look at how to clear this, don't we?
Should we tune in to see if anything else comes through about it, and then at the same time, um, what would be the best way to clear this?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I had a little bit more information on it when we were looking, that it's affecting both the mental level and the physical level. So it's depleting like the yin, the feminine energy of the body, like the in a way that keeps keeps women almost out of their ability to vision for themselves and carry through that vision. There's a sort of interaction here in the mental realm that's sort of almost like depleting one's ability to know for oneself what they want to do. It's
Mm.
quite an interesting energy, really. And I almost saw that even though it was coming from off planet, it was also somehow had been inserted into the DNA. So it's a bit like trying to isolate that and heal it in the timelines, in the feminine DNA ancestral lines as well.
Oh, wow, interesting. So when I was tuning in, I was looking at initially I was looking at the wave that I'd seen, and how to kind of counteract that type of influence, from the galactic realms. And I got two bits of information. And the first was, as a collective, we can reflect these types of interferences. Um, so, this is something that if you're listening and you want to tune in and try and do this, the first thing is to reconnect yourself with that kind of the stream of energy that comes up from the earth through your body and comes out of your crown chakra and connects with the universe. And just see that. I mean, I'm seeing it as a very pale gold, like almost like a white gold, and seeing that energy flow coming through your body and then projecting out of your solar plexus like a shield. So you actually form like a light shield. And then I can see everybody as a collective joined together, creating this huge, almost like a barrier, but it's reflective and it's just this huge, like white golden shield of collective energy that's just like not allowing anything to come and impact the earth and actually reflecting back up to the galactics, whatever they're sending. So in effect, it's a bit like a return to sender for any malefic spell work that's coming. And it's just sending it right back. And that has the impact of preventing them from doing it because it sends the actual impact back to them. Um, and then the second thing I was seeing was when I was seeing the wave, I was seeing all these hawthorn. Hawthorn is more a bush than a tree, but I was seeing it as quite tall bushes. Um, I was asking, yeah, first of all, I just saw it as a tree, and then I realized it was hawthorn. Um, and I saw all the people that were being affected by this energy wave to just ground with hawthorn. So you can do that as a visualization. Um, and the roots of hawthorn will take you back into that grounding energy of the earth. And I know hawthorn is a sacred plant, a sacred tree in Celtic lore of the British Isles. It's one of our native trees. It's also a very fey tree, and the fey realm will always assist with grounding and any of this type of work. They're an amazing realm to work with. So hawthorn came through strongly as a bit of an antidote to the impact. So I think the first thing I was seeing was how to stop the energy coming in, and then secondly, an antidote to what's already been impacted.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, Beth. And I was seeing if we needed a certain protector or helper in the spiritual realm to support our work. And I had Goddess Isis coming forward. And she's a bit like the color you were saying about this white reflective shield. I was seeing her lifting up her wings like a huge wingspan. That Isis is often presented as or represented with, in the same color, interestingly, but it
Oh
was
wow.
almost standing like in the sky with these wings protecting us from the galactic influence that was activating this ancestral implant that had been placed in a lot of the um, ancestral mother lines.
Wow, I love that. And that feels so supportive, her energy and her ability to reflect back that spell work as well.
And what she was telling me is that it's time now um, for this abuse to be removed, and that it has been a abuse on the feminine and been carried as a burden for most people experiencing a feminine lifetime. It doesn't seem to sit with the masculine, even though we have masculine and feminine within us, no matter what bodies we are. It seems to, because it comes through the physical, it seems to have really affected those in a female body in whatever lifetime they've come in, because it's been around, well, probably since ancient Egypt. So maybe, I don't know, 2000 years or so. So this is a really big shift, and Isis is looking for this to be, yeah, this to be no longer in play. That's, there's a healing, a universal healing required to stop this interference and to remove it from the human experience going forward.
Yeah, that's great. And I think talking about it now, we're able to not consent to that anymore. That's why looking into these things, understanding the energetic realms, these types of interferences means we can actually say we don't consent. Whereas if we're not even seeing it or wanting to see it or not wanting to understand it, we continue to consent. So it's really important at the moment to bring our awareness to all the different things that might be impacting on us so that we can decide and be empowered to decide what's okay and what is not okay.
Yeah, and I think that's so right to bring up consent, because we do have free will, and the trouble with free will is if things have been hidden and done
Yeah.
in a nefarious way, or there's been some sort of consent. What do they call it when we consent to something without realizing it, like almost unconscious consent?
Yeah, there's a word for it, a phrase for it, and now I can't remember it.
Yeah, I mean, now have this idea of informed consent, don't we? But there has been a lot of uh, trickery and manipulation in the past where we haven't always been aware
Yeah.
that this kind of process has been going on.
Yeah, and I think certain energies and beings have relied on that, have relied on us not realizing and almost using loopholes in the free will system, by getting again, I've forgotten the word, they're getting our consent, but without us really giving our consent. By showing us things in film and TV, they can get our consent in all these kind of strange ways.
It's like
Um,
a form of coercive control.
yeah, that feels great to have done that work tonight and to discuss what's been coming up today.
Yeah, and if anything, this podcast, I hope, shows people how we can really begin to firstly identify where the problem is and identify a way of healing it, a way of, eradicating it, like a medicine, really, in a kind of finding the energetic resonance and getting help to remove it so it's no longer a problem.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that we can start by just observing simple things like our thought patterns, our tiredness level, and seeing where there's a difference in a pattern. It's not the normal way that you would feel. It's not the normal thought pattern you'd have if nothing's really changed on the outside. And then looking at that, and then being able to heal a whole timeline and shift a whole area that's been impacted for thousands of years.
Yeah, and what I like to say on that as well, because Isis is just kind of pushing me to say it now, is that we have, obviously removed or deflective or sent back the kind of galactic interference, but there's still healing to be done on the program that's remaining in the DNA. There still
Yeah,
feels like on an individual and collective level, this is something that will be need to be worked through so that there is no longer a receptor to that particular vibration, frequency, spell work that was created, and that becomes part of our work to raise the vibration. And I was kind of asking, well, what is the way, like what is it we need to heal this particular aspect? And I usually work with, if it's bringing up some deep vibrational emotional stuff, I usually work with an emotional scale that you can see them on the internet. And if you're interested, you can Google the emotional frequency scale, and you'll see one coming up. And they're usually different colors and tell you different frequencies. And I'm being shown that the frequency of joy is the main vibration for healing this particular problem in the DNA.
beautiful. So I would say if people wanting to connect with joy as an antidote, um, a simple way that I use is by using color. So if I think of joy and think of it as an energy, like what color is that to me? And then the color anchors that frequency of that particular emotion. Um, so that's lovely that we can work with that as a healing tool.
And that's so beautiful because joy is actually the vibration I link with the archangel Jophiel, and who often comes in with a lot of healing energy. It's like it's bright sunshine, angelic being, and raising this vibration to joy. And often I see with clients like really helping other, particularly women, to come into their joy frequency, which is all part of the divine feminine energy.
Beautiful. Thank you. So that probably concludes our energy work for today. And we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Do let us know if you have any questions or if this resonates with anything that you've been experiencing or feeling. And any topics you particularly want us to cover in future podcasts, we'd always love to hear from you.
Yeah, and thanks for doing the work with me today, Bethan. Thank you to all the wonderful beings that have helped us, and our guides that work with us.
Yeah, thank you, Astara. And yeah, we'll look forward to speaking again soon.